Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another FNAF reaction. Hope you guys enjoyed that new starting soon screen. FNAF related, it was specifically FNAF 2 related. I was just looking around and everything. I'm like, oh, that FNAF 2 is firing everything, and I just had to do and everything. Because I've always wanted like a FNAF theme style, like starting soon, ending, which you will also see the ending when we do end the stream. But also, I wanted something that is dedicated towards FNAF because I feel like FNAF is a big part of my Twitch/YouTube channel journey and everything like that. So I wanted a space to be dedicated to that, which is great. But we are on this screen right now because it's just a just chatting section before we hop into the real part of the video, which is the FNAF reaction. But reason why we're here is just want to say just a couple things. I don't think I really did dive into my Superman 2025 review for the movie that came out. Feels like a month ago at this point, but I was very late to the party. I just saw yesterday. But I don't feel like I really dive into my review and everything. And no, by the way, I'm not going to be here for like 40, 50 minutes, an hour. It's going to be very brief. But I just want to say I did enjoy the movie. I love everything. Because I feel like I'm someone who needs to, when it comes to like watching a movie or show or something like that, I need some time to like process it before I can give my actual review and everything. And the conclusion I keep coming to for Superman 2025 is it's a lot like Spider-Man for me, because Spider-Man is and always will be my favorite superhero that just goes up being said. And to me, it's a lot of what Spider-Man Homecoming was for me, where, you know, there's a lot of like media, movies, shows out there that doesn't give the superhero the best like light or doesn't view them the best way. Like, for instance, Zack Snyder viewed Superman as just like, you know, ultra powerful god that views humanity as beneath them, and people, that's why people view Superman as boring, is because he's not human and he views humanity as beneath them. And then you have this movie where it actually makes him human. It actually has flaws, very similar to Spider-Man, for instance, where you had someone like the Amazing Spider-Man Sony that completely ruined him and it had no idea what they were doing. But then you had someone like Spider-Man Homecoming come out, and like, oh yeah, Spider-Man is a neighborhood superhero, and he has his flaws, and he goes from the high school nerdy Peter Parker persona and the Spider-Man persona, and it was fun. It was a great time. So that was a lot of what Superman 2025 is for me, and that's saying that as someone who is a Spider-Man fan. But if you're a Superman fan, you've been dying for something that actually has Superman in a good light, I'm sure this was that equivalent. At least I hope so. But anyway, let us get into the real main potatoes, the real reason why we are doing this stream, which is FNAF. And here we go. A dedicated FNAF background stream reaction space. And I personally like it. I personally like it a lot. We got the pizzeria background, the stars, we got the camera, we got chat right below us with that like very like 80s, 90s pixelated white noise. I'm indeed on camera. We got our battery. Very, very much like it. So I hope this is great, but we now have at long last, for doing FNAF style videos for over a year, we now have a dedicated space for FNAF stuff. So hope you guys enjoy it. But 3, 2, 1, here we go.
I was talking about Secret of the Mimic the other day on my weekly podcast, and we came to a sort of epiphany. One that I think not only ties Secret of the Mimic together with the rest of the timeline, but finally might tell us where the rest of the story is heading from here. And it has to do with the battle over the Mimic, not from the Mimic itself. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. We know the Mimic is involved with the overarching story of Security Breach, but the question has always been, Why? Even before Secret of the Mimic came out, once we heard about the Mimic from the books, and even more so, once we played through Ruin and saw that endoskeleton at the very end of it, we knew for a fact that the Mimic was crucial and vital to frankly every game since Help Wanted. And looking back over it with the Mimic's influence in mind, there have been breadcrumbs all along. The way Glitchtrap acts is incredibly indicative of a Mimic program. The way that it recreates things in Pizza Party. Hell, the way in Security Breach, there are several...
It depends. I've said this time and time and time again. Is what do we view Glitchtrap? What is Glitchtrap? Everyone asks, who is Glitchtrap? I want to know why is Glitchtrap. Is he another William Afton persona, like he actually is William Afton incarnated because he's not dead because he always comes back? Is he an actual computer virus because the reason why Glitchtrap was created was Phasma Entertainment was making that VR game trying to, make fun of their mistakes, make fun of their wrongdoing, and basically do like a whole reboot, reset, and poke fun at their own mistakes and everything. That was the whole point. And then when they got all this like computer code, they took all this like computer code to make the VR game, taking stuff from like FNAF 1, FNAF 2, right? Basically recreate it in VR mode. And one of the things they coded in was a glitching computer chip that had Glitchtrap inside. And as game testers saw Glitchtrap, they got more and more insane, more and more crazy, falling under Glitchtrap's influence and control. And that's what caused someone like Jeremy to slice his face off from the guillotine paper shredder, and someone like Vanessa to also put on the VR mask and also be under Glitchtrap's control and go under the Vanny persona. So, what is Glitchtrap? Is he a mimic? Is he William Afton incarnated? Is he just a virus computer program? Is he tied to the mimic at all? What is it? And I feel like that's also comes back to one of my questions we had going into Secret of the Mimic that I wanted answered, and I feel like we didn't get answered, is what makes a mimic? What exactly is a mimic? Because at this point, FNAF has had some sort of reset reboot, where FNAF has definitely had multiple stages and phases throughout the series. Which, unrelated note, FNAF has now crossed a 10-year anniversary, which is insane. But FNAF has definitely had multiple phases, multiple eras. It's a lot like Dragon Ball, where you have OG Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, but also multiple eras, multiple arcs in Dragon Ball. Same thing was like Naruto as well. You have multiple phases. And the phase can be defined as this. FNAF 1 to FNAF 4 is, haunted animatronics, spooky ghost stories of, a haunted animatronic pizzeria where you get caught by these killer animatronics at night, you get stuffed in the suits, and then hidden away and never be found again. And it was a lot to Dream Theory. And then FNAF 5, Sister Location, it switched a little bit because gone are the days where it's just haunted animatronics and spooky ghost stories. Sister Location was way more sci-fi, way more futuristic, where you had animatronics who were way more sentient. They were able to speak to you. They were able to trick to you. They were able to have consciousness. They were able to, have stuff like claw grips in their stomachs. They were able to have like sound illusion discs. They were able to, mimic voices and lure. And the point of the font animatronics made by After Robotics was to lure and encapsulate kids to build up enough remnant to lead to William Afton's goal of being immortal. And then another phase, another era, was the Security Breach, VR, Ruin, DLC, Help Wanted 1 and 2 era of FNAF, where it's more futuristic, more sci-fi, where we're dealing with like VRs, ARs, Glitchtrap viruses, mimics, computer programming, having sentience and taking over things, having a mind of its own and everything. And having the whole different factor of VR versus AR, of reality as itself is bending away and reality as we know it is changing. And right smack dab in the middle, the Mimic and Secret of the Mimic from 1960, 1970 predates all of those eras.
Rooms that are recreations of Help Wanted rooms. In Help Wanted 2, the idea that we have to teach endoskeletons with this memory game, or the endomaze in general. In Help Wanted 2, the idea of Projector Helpy being this character that's kind of talking to us. And then obviously in Ruin, we have the Mimic, but we also have Helpy in the mask talking to us the whole time. There are signs.
But as we know, there's different versions of Helpy. There's Helpy with the Y and Helpy with an I. And yes, those are very, very, very important. Help with the Y is a jump scare that you see in like Ultimate Custom Night and is the, like little guy that you see in your FNAF 6 Pizzeria Simulator as you are buying items for your Pizzeria Tycoon game, but also is a person that is like writing the stuff in like the Lawsuits minigame, which is very funny, very fourth wall, very, very bizarre, but also, once again, very funny. But then you have Help You with an I, which is the stuff you see in Ruin that has the like AR network inside of them. It's something that you see in Help Wanted VR2, the guy on the screen, everything encouraging you to fall under the influence of the VR, AR, Glitchtrap, and Mimic network. Right, that's Help You with an I.
Of the Mimic all over these games. But the motivation, or the reason, has always been a mystery. Why is the Mimic still around? What is its goal? How does it tie into Glitchtrap and the Pizzaplex? Well, I think I finally figured it out. And it's not actually the Mimic or M2's specific goal, but it's the goal of the people and entities around it. The big reveal of Secret of the Mimic is twofold. It's the idea that there are actually at least two mimics. First was M1. It was the original mimic that was trained on Fiona to become a better caretaker for David, Edwin Murray's son, and of course Fiona being Edwin Murray's wife. Edwin then worked on trying to recreate the mimic so it could be a sellable product. But when his son David died, M1 began pressuring Edwin into making another mimic to train on David. M1's main programming now is to take care of a child. Without a child, she is lost. So she wants Edwin to make M2 to be David. And eventually this begins to work when he makes a copy of M1's code and begins training that on David. But eventually he comes to his senses and realizes that all of this is an insane mistake that he's making, and he stops working on it. But it's too late, as M2 is already starting to mimic David. This is too much for him, and he beats the robot senseless, to which then later it tricks and traps Edwin into getting himself killed in the office, and M2 is on its own. Now, when I say M1 is Fiona, I don't like saying M2 is David. After all, it's really not. M2 is more of a conglomeration of a few characters. There's bits of David, bits of the characters that it tries to copy, and even bits of Edwin. Of course, all laced with the violence that Edwin taught it, whether that be through agony or just rote programming. But
I will say M2 is a mixed conglomeration. At least my interpretation has always been it's a mixed conglomeration of Edwin and David. M1 is Fiona, Edwin's wife, 100%. Once again, M1, their whole goal is trying to assemble their family back together. And that's why M1 keeps pushing Edwin to create a robot version of the dead son, David, so that they can have their family back together. Then M2 is the homicidal villain that goes on murder rampage after Edwin is filled with grief and agony of his now dead son is now being mimicked in the robot creation that he made. Once again, his own fault. now comes back to bite him because the same violence that he inflicted on the robot that mimics things is now being inflicted back onto him as revenge. Right? But I think something that we've talked about time and time again is Moon.exe. Moon.exe, the minigame you get through the helpy computer programming in Secret of the Mimic, tells us a lot about sun, moon, eclipse from ruin that we talked about in the previous FNAF theory. And basically it's the idea of we see someone who's sun, who we've interpreted to be M1 and Fiona. But then the Moon Man, the person that gets you when you do the wrong sequence, trying to, complete the Moon.exe minigame, is Edwin. Right? And then the little, bird creature that you see is David. And then the mask that you put on is the M2 programming, learning how to be human, coming into consciousness, and learning its programming, learning its purpose.
M2 is the program in the endoskeleton, likely the thing we see at the end of Ruin, while M1 is at this point just a program within one of the experimental storage containers. So the question that needs to be answered is, if these two existed in the 70s, what's happened from then to now? Obviously, a major chunk of the timeline is in the middle, and we still don't have much information on what that could be. One possible explanation posited is also by T-Dreads. He's the guy who made Schedule Theory last week. His theory is called God David, and I'm not really going to go into it right now because it's not super relevant. Obviously, you should go and watch the full video since it's a good video, but I brought him on the podcast to talk about that theory, and it's in that conversation where I kind of settled on mimic custody. Because the thing that keeps holding me back from being a true believer in God David is why William Afton would want to turn the crying child into Dave. Or at least why William Afton would want to help Fiona recreate David. I kept being hung up on William Afton's nature and a lack of motivation for that part of the theory, but that's when I realized maybe William Afton isn't helping to recreate David, but maybe he started with that goal in mind. So what happens after Secret of the Mimic? Well, we know for a fact that Fazbear Entertainment, and by extension William Afton, reclaims all of the property that Edwin Murray once owned. They mention in the email that he would never touch his house, but once Edwin Murray turns up dead, that's easy pickings. But if that's the case,
and we know Fazbear Entertainment, let's just be honest here, keep it a stack, keep it 100p, we know Fazbear Entertainment cuts corners, they're manipulative, and they do whatever they want, and there's nothing you can say or do that stops them. Hell, through the emails, we know William Afton is poaching Edwin's employees from the costume manor, trying to get them to come over to work for him and Henry at Fazbear Entertainment. And they do it. And that's what causes Edwin to not trust Fazbear Entertainment. That, Edwin's dad was right. Do not trust Fazbear. Which, indeed.
And William Afton and Fazbear Entertainment got their hands on the entire Murray's Costume Manor, what would William Afton see when he got there? Now, this is a bit controversial, but for this theory to work, the first ending of Secret of the Mimic needs to be canon. No, not the secret ending, and not the ending where we keep the data diver, confront the Mimic, and confront Fiona, set everything on fire, and escape, kind of, but rather the first ending, where Arnold just simply hands over the data diver to who he thinks is Dispatch, leaves, is killed by the Mimic, and we cut to M2 being entertained by a showtime in research and development. The reason this ending needs to be canon is it so cleanly keeps everything together and contained. If this ending truly happened before William Afton takes over the entire location, then when William Afton gets down...
Chow, what do you think the true ending of Secret of the Mimic is? Because ever since FNAF 3, FNAF 3 was the first time in the series where we got a differentiating factor of good ending versus bad ending. And ever since FNAF 3, every single FNAF game to follow chronologically has had good ending, bad ending, true ending, secret ending, multiple endings ever since FNAF 3 onwards. And it's always a debate of, what's the ending? What's the true ending? So what do you think the true ending of Secret of the Mimic is? Me personally, I don't think this ending where you just play through the game normally, you get tricked by the Mimic for handing over the Mimic the day never with the full-on executive access, and then, you presumably, as Arnold, get killed by M2 in the van. I do not think that is the canon true ending at the game. At least, not the only canon ending. Because, like I said, ever since FNAF 3, this series has taught us, ever since the very beginning, you can say all you want about FNAF being very loosey-goosey, very inconsistent, very, nitpicky here and there, where it's like, oh, this detail means something very important, but then the following game, it doesn't mean anything. It's very wishy-washy. You can say all that about the story, but very few things remain consistent about this series. And one of those things is endings. Because ever since FNAF 3, just playing through the game normally has always been the not true ending. In FNAF 3, you play through the game normally, you get the bad ending. The true ending is you play through the game, and then you have to, double-click the cupcakes, double-click the Shadow Bonnie pup on the desk, and go through those minigames to get the Happy Stay minigame to lay the souls to rest. That gets the true good ending. In Sister Location, you just getting scooped by Ennard and the animatronics, and I'm using them as a skin suit, is considered a bad ending. The secret ending is you play through the Circus Baby Cupcake minigame that unlocks the secret room where you have the Ennard boss fight, and then you get that secret ending. In FNAF 6 Pizzeria Simulator, you have to get the true ending, the true secret ending, by salvaging every single animatronic, playing through the game, and then getting the iconic FNAF 6 Henry speech. In Help Wanted 1, you have to collect all the tapes to unlock the Pizza Party minigame, where you get lured in by Glitchtrap and then stuffed into a Freddy suit, and then playing on stage as your killer is prancing away, dancing away, because you were killed. The point of what I'm trying to make is every single game this series has taught us, just playing through the game normally, not going after any secrets, Easter eggs, nothing, just playing through the game normally, has taught us you get the bad ending. And then Security Breach, you just leave the pizzeria at the end of the night, it's a bad ending. You have to decommission, disassemble every single animatronic going into the Afton room, which is maybe a canon ending, because that explains how the pizzeria is destroyed into ruin. But also Princess Quest is also deemed as canon, because it also connects to Ruin. It also connects to Help Wanted 2. Right, that's a secret ending. You have to do stuff outside the normal playthrough to get to the secret or true ending. Also, no, stop being itchy, goddamn. So playing through the game normally, why would Secret of the Mimic, this game, be the true ending? Where you just play through the game normally, when we have been taught, we've been conditioned that you have to go out of bounds. You have to do extra stuff. You have to find Easter eggs. You have to find secrets to get the true ending. You have to do extra stuff.
To research and development, a room he would know existed because that's where the Fazbear Project is, he would find M2 watching a show in his prototype pizzeria and find M1 being the one directing it. From everything we know about William Afton, this would be one of the most fascinating things he's seen so far in the timeline. So when he eventually meets M1, she informs him of what's going on. M2 is meant to be David, but he needs to be repaired with the original Mimic schematics, so she's waiting for Edwin to finally come down and fix M2. And it's then that William would likely inform M1 that Edwin is dead. But William Afton is an inventor himself, and he might be able to help Fiona recreate David. Now, why would William Afton want to do this? Well, one, it would probably be fascinating for him, but two, if he could recreate David and maintain the Mimic schematics, not only could he experiment on these two things, but he would have an incredibly helpful product on his hands. But to be safe, he needs to work on and better understand the Mimic schematics before attempting to upload them to M2. So he leaves out the back way the same way that Arnold would in the second ending, and ends up in the bunker laboratories underneath Edwin's house. He begins studying the schematics, but quickly realizes he needs a safer environment to properly test on the Mimic schematics. Luckily, Edwin Murray has already created such a container. In fact, he's created two. Earlier in the game, in Edwin's office in the factory, we see on the monitor experimental storage number 2, which is where the Mimic schematics are held. And later, in his office in his house, we see mechanical X-form experimental storage 1, which is where Cradle.exe is capable of being run. I think it's very clear that these are both referring to two separate mechanical X-form experimental storage containers. The game just didn't want to spoil what that meant,
aka Mitsis, which is bizarre because we know Mitsis, the first time Mitsis appeared was FNAF Ruin. And the whole point of Mitsis was a security protocol to prevent Cassie from shutting down the security to keep the Mimic locked away underneath the pizza plats, underneath FNAF sits, and keep it locked away in the bunker. But here is Mitsis, predating all that in the 70s, being Fiona F10 and 4, and also being a Mimic program themselves, which is very bizarre.
Halfway through the game. And this makes sense. The first mechanical X-form experimental storage was made and labeled likely as MXES, but when making the second one for M1's programming, it was instead labeled F10N4. Otherwise, somebody for some reason during this timeline came and carved a different name into this console, which doesn't make a lot of sense. But if Fiona is in Fiona, then MXES is likely empty, which is where William Afton could deposit the Mimic schematics and better experiment on them. So William uploads a copy of the Mimic schematics, essentially making M3. And once it's in there, he begins training it on himself to see if he can properly get the program to work and make a copy of William Afton. So all of this is happening during the late 70s to early 80s. And while William Afton is working on M3, other Fazbear buildings start to be built around the property. The old Murray Manor is eventually rebuilt into the FNAF 4 house.
I was trying to think of timeline for a second because we're talking about 1983 now. Mind you, while all this is going on, supposedly, if this is true, William Afton is making M3 another incarnation of the Mimic program from the Mitsis machine. You have 1983, which is indeed FNAF 4. You have 1985, which is the Fredbear's Family Diner, Into the Pit, where you had the two Springlock suits of Golden Freddy, Golden Bonnie. FNAF 2, which is another pizzeria establishment with the toy animatronics having a security protocol database inside them to prevent someone coming into the building and killing kids, which obviously doesn't work. All that is happening while he's supposedly making M3. So just keep this in mind of why the FNAF timeline is so complicated.
Murray's costume manor is pretty much gone, and now a new Fredbear's Family Diner is built in its place. Over time, the underground bunker underneath Murray's house is being converted into the sister location bunker, and R&D is being left relatively untouched for fear of disturbing M2. All the while, William Afton is still trying to turn M3 into a copy of himself. This leans on a theory I made before Secret of the Mimic came out, the idea that William could see this as a form of immortality. This might be where his whole obsession with living forever comes from. He goes to the Murray's Costume Manor and finds Fiona, a woman he thought was long dead but has been recreated digitally in M1. If William Afton can figure out how to turn M3 into a good copy of himself, even if William Afton were to die, this version of him would go on to live forever and continue enacting what his will would want. I also think part of it is William seeing this as a challenge to conquer, something that Edwin couldn't do and he could. Another way he could prove himself better than his others.
Interesting. So, I could be interpreting this wrong, but based on that sentence, it sounds like to me the goal of William Afton's immortality, which, once again, we know that's a thing. That's not someone new. Oh my god, William Afton wanted to be immortal. Like, no, that's something we've known for years. That's where the iconic "I'll always put you back together" line, all the way back from FNAF 3, came from. Right? William Afton has been skewered in a spring lock incident in FNAF 3. He's been burned in FNAF 3. He's been burned in FNAF 6. Right? And he's been banished to hell in Ultimate Custom Night. But he indeed always comes back. He never dies. Glitchtrap being the goal of immortality. Glitchtrap being like the device of William Afton's goal of being immortal. It's very interesting. And I feel like I need to think about it a little bit more. I need to chew on that idea interpretation a little bit more. Because it's the same goal in mind, but it's a different device, different machine, different vehicle of getting there. Because what I've always thought is William Afton's goal, immortality, was fueled by Remnant, the Funtime animatronics, and after the infamous bite in FNAF 4, Night 5 of FNAF 4, where Michael Afton shoves, maybe David, but the FNAF crying child, shoves the mouth of Fredbear, and due to the FNAF crying child is crying, trying to wiggle out because, well, they were shoving the mouth of an animatronic that they're scared of. The moisture from the tears causes the spring locks to snap shut, effectively killing William Afton's son. Right? And that in turn causes William Afton to create the Funtime animatronics, which has the stomach claw gripping baby, the voice lure, the sound illusion disc in Funtime Freddy, and his stomach catch, right? Has all these like crazy futuristic devices trying to lure and encapsulate kids, to capture them, scoop them out, harvest their remnant, their agony, their soul juice, and then being infused into William Afton, and that is his goal of immortality. Not the Mimic Mrs. Fiona machine. That's how I've always interpreted how we got to William Afton's goal of immortality. It's not the Mrs. Machine Mimic stuff, it's following the FNAF 4 bite of the FNAF 4 Crying Child and Sister Location. That's how we got to William Afton's goal. So I feel like I need to chew on that a little bit more. No pun intended.
Down, you want me to change how I'm holding? Ooh, how's this? Ooh, is that good? Is that nice? At this point, the Aftons have fully moved into the FNAF 4 house, and the crying child has moved into David's old room, explaining why it appears in
even though we know the girl's room is empty, and that's a big point. So, get rid of Elizabeth Afton.
his nightmares. But as William tired away and focused on making M3 into William Afton, his neglect of his own children caught up to him, much like Edwin himself, and the crying child gets bit at Fredbear's the bite of 83, something that sends him into a coma and later kills him. This sends William Afton over the edge. This can't be. He's an excellent businessman, an innovator, someone much better than anyone around him. Of course, this is his own narcissism talking, but in this obsession over making M3 into himself, he's falling into the same exact trap that Edwin Murray did. Edwin Murray obsessed over the mimics, so much so that his wife and his son died while he ignored the both of them. He's obviously better and smarter and more efficient than Edwin Murray could ever be, but here he is, being obsessed over the mimic to the point where his own son dies.
Was Edwin obsessed with the mimic, making the M1 program, then later M2? Was he obsessed with the mimic? Or was he obsessed with trying to recreate the success of the vacuum cleaner, and every invention he could create after that would fail, and that later created his obsession and his workaholic nature that caused him to ignore his wife and his son, which both led to their demise? His own success is what was his greatest failure.
From his negligence. He can't believe it. His story can't end like this. He can't be Edwin Murray. Edwin was a naive fool, one so stupid that he was able to crush his business like a grape and savor its flavors. But here he was, being stumped by the same puzzle. No, he was better than Edwin Murray. Edwin couldn't recreate David into M2, so he would do what Edwin couldn't. He would put his son back together again. Casey cameo for as long as he lets me. This is why and when William Afton builds the FNAF 4 testing chambers. In case you need to be caught up, it's incredibly likely that there were actual underground chambers that looked very similar to the FNAF 4 nightmares, and they were attached to the sister location bunker in order to study the effects of fear on people. We see this described in Dinophobia, and several pieces of evidence since then seem to point into that direction. The question has always been, why? Well, this might be the initial reason why. After all,
It's been interpreted for as long as I can remember, which is very bizarre and weird. Well, like, we've completely done a 180, meaning FNAF 4. Which is odd, because we still don't know the true story of FNAF 4. But we went from the FNAF 4 animatronics, the nightmare animatronics, being actual nightmares, being fueled by, at one point in the very beginning, we believed the player character we play as in FNAF 4 is the FNAF 4 crying child who is seen in between nights, scared of the pizzeria, scared of the animatronics. And that is what's causing this fear to be reincarnated in these like nightmare, horrific machines in FNAF 4. And then it would later be interpreted that, oh, it was the sound illusion discs at play. And that's what's leading to these like horrific, ripped apart, mangled teeth animatronics. And now it's experiments on somebody through William Afton. And at one point, I don't know if this is still true, but a common theory out there is the character we play as in FNAF 4 is Michael Afton, which is common because it seems like every game in the series is we play as Michael Afton, or Michael Afton's connected to the player character in some way. And the experiments of the nightmare animatronics is torture, punishment for Michael Afton shoving his younger brother and the mouth of Fredbear, leading to his coma, leading to his death. This is now William Afton getting back at him as punishment for killing their son. Now you deal with these nightmare, horrific animatronics as experimentations of what fear does to someone.
This is right after William received these underground bunkers to experiment in, and he's now trying to make M2 into his own son. His son who was absolutely terrified of.
Even though, once again, not to keep talking about FNAF 4, but FNAF 4, as always we know it, is very complicated, very confusing, and I feel like, I'm just being honest, chat, if we come to an actual understanding, if we as a humanity, we as a species, come to full understanding of what FNAF 4 is, I feel like, just like that, the whole mystery of FNAF, timeline, lore, mystery, Easter eggs, all the stuff that we've been slaving over for over a decade at this point is just like that solved. FNAF 4 is the key to everything. I swear to you, it is. Right? It is the key to everything. Because, mind you, let's just think about how FNAF 4 is connected to everything. FNAF 4 was built in connection to sister location. Right? So it's connected to sister location, Funtime. Okay? Well, sister location has a scooping room. Right? A game that also has a scooping room is FNAF Security Breach Ruin. Now, whether it's the same scooping room or different, who's to say at this point? Some people said it's the same scooping room. Some people said it was inspired by the Dislocation bunker. But regardless, say FNAF 4 and Dislocation, they're connected. But then you have the FNAF 6 Pizzeria location being connected and built underneath Security Breach. Right? But then, if we want to get really granular for a second, not only is it built on top and connected to Security Breach, but it's also a setting we play as in FNAF VR Help 1 and 2. The burned down pizzeria, FNAF 6 establishment, is the location we play as in FNAF VR Help 1 and 2. So, FNAF 4, sister location, FNAF 6, FNAF VR Help 1 and 1 and 2, and then Ruin, Security Breach are all connected to FNAF 4. We solve FNAF 4, we solve all those games just like that.
Animatronics. It would take a lot of effort to make the Mimic something built to be an animatronic, afraid of them. So he builds the FNAF 4 chambers directly next to the research and development prototype pizzeria, and leads M2 inside of it, locking it in and subjecting it to endless recreations of nightmares. Fiona obviously objects to this, but it's not her experiment to dictate. William Afton leaves her there. She can't control that much, and she was already low on power when William arrived. He then moves the MXES console nearby to oversee the experiments of M2 while he continues to train M3 to better recreate himself. And also it gives him free time to work on his other budding experiments, the Funtime animatronic, something that would be directly connected to this bunker. But eventually, he's still too obsessed with this and too deep into all of these experiments to truly watch his own children. And another one of his children, Elizabeth Afton, dies because of that negligence. But in William's mind, this is the second child that Michael Afton was supposed to be watching over and died on his watch.
Yes and no. Not to nitpick for a second. Not to nitpick. But I'm gonna nitpick. This interpretation, yes and no. Because of one crucial detail. In this interpretation, this means the FNAF 4 Crown Child dies before Elizabeth Afton, his sister. Which is very odd and very bizarre. So, then my questions is this. Is in why in FNAF 4, is there an empty girl's room if Elizabeth Afton dies after the FNAF 4 Crown Child? Why does Fredbear have a stomach mouth if Elizabeth Afton has not died yet? Why does the FNAF 4 Crown Child scare the animatronics if there's nothing to be afraid of yet? Right? Why are those things happening? So that's my nitpick. That is my, but actually for a second, there's my moment. Is of Elizabeth Afton being after the FNAF 4 Crown Child. Why is that? Why is the girl's room empty in FNAF 4 then if she hasn't died yet?
Enough is enough. William pulls M2 out of the FNAF 4 chambers. Maybe it's been enough time, maybe it hasn't. But Michael needs to learn a lesson, and William's starting to get curious as to what this chamber would do to a human person. So he puts M2 back into the research and development pizzeria to keep it locked away, and puts Michael Afton into the FNAF 4 nightmare chambers for the time being. But he doesn't want to look at this mess in the day-to-day anymore, so he pulls M3 out of the MXES console back into the data diver to continue experimenting on it elsewhere. But it's around this time that William notices the strange characteristics of Circus Baby after the death of Elizabeth, and starts to suspect possession. It's something that's been nagging at the back of his mind ever since he listened to that one tape where Edwin seemed convinced that Fiona was possessing M1. Maybe possession was real, and if so, could that then be manipulated? And this is when William Afton would begin researching possession and later Remnant, all with M3 tucked away in his data diver. Cut to many years later, after FNAF 6, after everything is settled and everyone is dead, Fazbear Entertainment is making a comeback. Somebody buys up the company trying to flip it and make a quick buck on selling it. But first things first, they have to save its dying reputation. It's riddled with crime scenes and news stories. So the CEO decides to release a VR game, making a bit of fun of itself and telling the public, look, this is what I mean, he likes to play. All that's in the past, we're not like that anymore. And after pilfering through Fazbear's old tech to try to find anything to help create this, they encounter something called a data diver. They're not quite sure what it is, but looking into it, there's plenty of very sophisticated coding. But it is Fazbear proprietary technology, so they can't just leave it with anyone. They send it to the third party making the VR game to scan it in and reclaim it before they can figure out exactly what it is. And at first, it works wonders. It begins unfolding several animatronics and pathing sites and locations and characters. And then some testers notice that it begins to form its own character. I think it's at this point that Glitchtrap is inputted into Help Wanted from the data diver.
Because all we know is what we get from the Tape Girl tapes from FNAF VR Help Wanted. All we know is Fazbear Entertainment collected a bunch of circuit boards, machinery, and junk. Scanned that into their VR game to, fast track the process because, hey, why program everything from scratch when you can just scan these things in these, previous circuit boards and, just like that, it speed runs everything. Them being lazy led to their own demise. So I scanned it in, right, to recreate FNAF 1, FNAF 2. But in turn, them scanning corrupted machine, encrypted circuit boards and computer chips is what led to Glitchtrap slowly coming to consciousness, slowly coming to full view of their game. And that's all we knew. But we never got an idea of it being a data diver. That's interesting. Huh. Because I'm trying to think about it for a second. Because in FNAF Ruin, the main device you use it's called a Faz Wrench. But we've used that as like a early demo, beta, pre-alpha version of the Data Diver because of the same device. It's a handheld device with two prongs on the end and everything, and you stick it and you twist it. So from being a Data Diver to a Faz Wrench in FNAF Ruin. And we know Cassie's dad had one of those Data Diver Faz Wrenches. They were a Fazbear technician. And we know in FNAF VR Help 1 and 2, the second VR game, we believe to be playing as Cassie's dad. So you have a VR game having a Data Diver Faz Wrench. Interesting. That's bizarre. Right? Because otherwise, how else does Cassie's dad get his hands on like a Fazwrench data diver? If not for them being one of the things that they scan into the VR game. How else does he have one? Interesting. Oh, okay. Huh. That's interesting. That has never clicked with me. But now that I'm hearing on it, I'm kind of on board. I like it. Okay.
This digital recreation of William Afton quickly realizes that this world isn't real. A place that can just manifest things surely must be some sort of digital realm. So mission 1 is get out of here. It immediately looks for a body in the real world and notices that occasional humans come in to poke around. He fails on the first and second attempt, but the third tester seems a bit more malleable and willing to dig deeper where others wouldn't, and he's able to claw his way into her mind, and as he's learned is possible from M1's testimony, makes a copy of his own code to input into her mind, making Vanessa into Vanny, or in this case, M4. Using her, it learns of what's become of Fazbear since it's been locked away, learns of the failed businesses and the buried locations. It realizes that if it really truly wants to return to this world, it needs a proper body. And it has a feeling that M2, or possibly even William Afton's original corpse, may still be in that old R&D building. So Glitchtrap, or M3, or fittingly, as I think I might start calling it, Malhair. Now,
Malhair, alright. Okay, that's... Man, but also now that there's 4, potentially 5 Mimic programs now, maybe more, because, let's be honest, Help You With an Eye is also a Mimic network, because they're also tied to the VR AR network, and they're the reason why they encourage Cassie to put on the Vanny mask, which we know is tied to the M network, to have Cassie put on the Mimic mask, the Vanny mask, to have the ossible nerve being put inside them, to be the new Vanny, aka the new M5 or M6 or whatever. Okay.
this name is not new. Malhair has been around for a while, but if you all caps it, you can lead speech it with M and 3.
Also, Malhair sounds like malware, which we know Glitchtrap is a virus.
M3, Malhair. I like that a lot. But Malhair begins to infiltrate the company's systems, slightly directing it and guiding it into ways that are more advantageous for itself. A Pizzaplex was already being built, but why not build it on that free plot of land you already own? And why not be a bit more lax about the construction rules, so me and this random security guard can go dig down and find the old bunker underneath. And eventually they do find the research and development pizzeria, although they note that it's been changed fairly drastically. It seems like Henry Emily must have meddled with it in the meantime. Regardless, they uncover the M2 mimic endoskeleton, but it's still active and still as violent as ever. They need to take M2 out of that endoskeleton so Malhair can be inputted into it. This would be the perfect body for Malhair to become William Afton again, but that damn mimic M2 is still stuck in it. They need the Mexis console, and they need it to be functional to use Cradle.exe and get M2 out of the endoskeleton. But neither of them are able to crack it. They need someone who's slightly better at programming than the either of them. So they then target Gregory, a child who seems to have an incredible aptitude for coding and programming. Now, while all of this is happening, when they uncovered the old bunker, M2 isn't the only thing they dug up. M1 was still down there as well, and begins influencing the Pizzaplex and everything she can around them to stop them and protect M2 from William Afton's clutches. And that's what I think the current story of Security Breach is. M1 and M3, or Malhair, or Glitchtrap as is familiarly called, fighting over the control of the body of M2. M1 wants to leave M2 as is and return it to David so she can have her son again. And William Afton, or Glitchtrap, or Malhair, or M3 wants a fresh, new, usable body to come back to life in. So where does M2 fall in all of this? What are M2's motivations? What does M2 want? Well, unfortunately, that's a theory for another.
Man, Okay, that's interesting. I mean, off rip and everything, if we can 100% determine, lock it in, clear as day right now on, right, this day, going forward until the sun blows up and everything, lock it in place that Glitchtrap is a mimic program, great. I'm all for this theory immediately. Because, like I said, that's something I've been wanting answered from the very beginning, leading up to Secret of the Mimic. Is what is Glitchtrap? How is Glitchtrap? Is he tied to the Mimic program? Is he not? Is he just some computer virus, a new villain? William Afton incarnated? William Afton's soul is infused in a computer chip, and that's Glitchtrap? Like, what is he? So, any theory explaining Glitchtrap, I'm all for it. All for it, guaranteed. You have me on board. But my question, though, as we are wrapping up and everything, is how does Gregory fit into all this? Right? How does Gregory fit onto all this in Security Breach? Because let's just go down the list. Gregory, for some reason, causes Freddy to glitch out at the beginning of Security Breach and cause him to be booted into safe mode and not be powered into the Mimic program network. Meanwhile, the other animatronics are. So why does that happen? Why is Gregory able to glitch into and hack all the arcade games where it says GGY on every single arcade machine? Why does Vanessa, Vanny, and Burntrap want Gregory then? Why does and how does the Mimic in FNAF Ruin get their hands on Gregory's voice to be able to mimic it to lure Cassie down to the bunker, cause them and trick them to unlock all the security protocols and release them? Now it's able to roam free. Why is it able to do all those things then? How does Gregory connect to all this? Right? This custody battle with M1, Fiona, Mitz's, and Fiona connect to Glitchtrap, William Afton, Fazbear Entertainment, Vanny. Gregory is somewhere in the middle of all this. How does he connect to all that? That is something, I guess, it's going to have to be answered on another day. Another day forward of trying to figure out how is Gregory.